Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have some major developments in the kidnapping of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. The FBI has now upped the reward to the arrest and conviction of whoever did this from $50,000 to $100,000. We've been calling for that since day one. We also have the first physical description of the suspected kidnapper, although the FBI used all these tools, and we said it just from looking at him, and it was 5'10" to 6 foot, 185 to 200 pounds. We didn't need all those tools, but they used all these tools, so you got to give them the credit that they said he's about 5'9" to 5'10", medium build. We even gave a weight. So, and a new note went out to TMZ, claims someone knows exactly who the kidnappers are. But are we finally closing in on the suspect, or has this investigation been compromised from the start? We're going to break it down. And a quick reminder, if you're looking for real crime insight, not YouTube theories, this channel's different. I'm a retired NYPD Sergeant, and on Police Off the Cuff, we analyze the cases the way cops and prosecutors do, what matters, what doesn't, and what the internet gets wrong. If that's the perspective you want, subscribe now, because this isn't entertainment, it's experience. Also, I'd like you to know that this show is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network. So, folks, make lots of comments, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share with your friends and family, and that helps our algorithm grow. It helps our show. So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your thoughts. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
I'm going to bring my co-host in right away today. What we have, retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Detective Phil Grimaldi. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you for having me, Billy.
And we also have retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney at law, and not a dog expert, but welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Bill, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Good to see you.
For those that weren't here yesterday, Mike said they used the dog they used to sniff out people's a basset hound, and I took exception to that. And also not being a dog expert myself, but I thought it was a little bit funny. So when something's funny, I'll point it out. Anyway, some new things occurring today. One of the big things, Phil, and you've been calling it probably before anyone else, was they got to raise the reward on this case because $50,000 is not cutting it. So the FBI raised it to $100K. Is that gonna stir the pot a little bit, Phil?
I mean, it could help. It's double from what it was, 50 to 100,000. $100,000 seems like a lot of money, but it's not life-changing in my opinion. You know, when you go back to history, the Lindbergh kidnapping, if you took the amount of money that was offered back then and you compare it to today's standards, it was about $5 to $6 million estimated. So I think that there needs to be a huge increase of the reward. I think that there's no honor amongst thieves, and we know that there's probably more than one person involved in this disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. I'm not even going to call it a kidnapping because I'm not putting a lot of weight into that anymore. But the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, there has to be several people that know something about this case. And when you put a large reward, it might just spark the interest to make that one call that's going to be the linchpin to turn this whole case and bring it to a successful conclusion.
Mike, the big thing here, and I'll put it up, we had this a couple of days ago, the person of interest. And right away, what they started doing was, all right, we got to identify what kind of gloves are those. We got to identify who makes the mask he's wearing. How about the jacket? How about the backpack? So all of those things are important investigative steps and leads and to try to track. And that's what detectives do. And lo and behold, they've identified the backpack as coming from Walmart. Practically Walmart's the only one that sells it. But that is a long shot now. So now what do investigators do? They go to Walmart with either stills from this video or this video, and they ask people in Walmart, have you seen this guy? So rather long shot, wouldn't you say, Mike?
It is, and this is where it's painstaking, because say there's a huge Walmart, 15 miles away, 10 miles away. You go there and you talk to the people in that department. You look at if there's any possible way that you could, if the video is still available. You look at it and go over it, and it's painstaking, because you're going to spend probably weeks looking at this sort of stuff, and maybe you're going to come up with nothing. Maybe it was bought 5 years ago at a Walmart in New Mexico or Texas, but it looks fairly new, because you can see how clean it was when it was reflecting whatever light was there at the time that he went to the front door. So you think it's fairly new, but it's the slow grind of an investigation now. It's not a dynamic where you see in a 40-minute show where they get, 60-minute show where they get the guy. No, it's not like that. This is going to take a long time. And the media, unfortunately, doesn't have the patience for it. And they start saying all kinds of things like, oh, this is a cold case. And that's misleading. But this is the grind. And this is the time-consuming work that detectives have to do. And the FBI is doing too. And there's no way to get around it.
100%. Phil, I'm going to show this quick. This was another lead they had yesterday, and they have since cleared this individual. And this was the individual with the 2 backpacks and a face mask and going over someone's fence. Let's just watch this.
It's from about 5 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's house, and you see a man there. He's got a backpack on. Remember, the guy who came to Nancy's house had a backpack on. His face is not covered, and we've blurred the face because police haven't said that this person is involved at all. But we know that the sheriff's office has the video and is looking into the video. But you see him go up to a gate. It looks suspicious. He kind of goes near a trash can, is looking around, and then walks away. But this is 5 miles away again from Nancy's house, and it's shot around the same time, at least.
So they have since cleared that guy. He's not, but my question is, well, what the hell was he doing though? I mean, he's got a mask on. He's trying to jump someone's fence. He's a criminal. He's a criminal. Maybe he's not involved in this, but now they cover his face because, we don't want to, he's innocent. But no, he's a criminal. He's doing a criminal act. He's at least trespassing. If he goes over the fence, it shows intent to do a burglary. So, let's not, pat him on the back and say, oh, we're sorry, we stopped you, Phil.
Well, we don't know the context of the video. And I think Brian Enton said there that his face wasn't covered, that he didn't have a ski mask on or anything like that. But either way, they've deciphered and they've investigated and they've eliminated him as being involved in this case. What he was doing, I guess that remains to be seen. Perhaps maybe, the trespassing or looking for a girlfriend or something. Well, God only knows. But I don't think that that's really relevant at this point. They've determined, and the investigators are satisfied with the fact that this person is not involved in this Nancy Guthrie disappearance. A quick point I wanted to make about the backpack. Walmart has an item number for that backpack. They could probably go into their computer system and see how many was sold in the last, let's say, 30 days or something like that. And then I think that what the investigators would do is they would try to match up obviously how it was paid for. If it was paid for with a credit card, you can easily contact that person and try to interview them. And if it's cash, they could go to the video. Either way, they'll go to the video to see what the person looked like that purchased the backpack. Now, if we have someone that's about 5'9", 5'10", medium build, probably with dark hair because it looks like there was a dark mustache, and similar to the video that we have from in front of Nancy Guthrie's home on the night of the disappearance, I think that would be something that would be worthwhile looking into. So I'm sure that the investigators are tracking all of that stuff down. Mike said it did look like it was fairly new. I mean, it didn't look beat up to me too. I agree with that. Perhaps this thing was bought within the last couple of days or maybe even the last couple of months. I heard one report that some video in Walmart's is kept up to 120 days. So I think that we have a good window that they could look into. And that could, you never know, that could be the exact linchpin that's needed to solve this case.
We found out something also that is a little bit disturbing. And the Pima County Sheriff's Office, apparently on day one, inside the home of Nancy Guthrie in the crime scene discovered a glove that belonging to the perpetrators. Who else could it have been belonging to? And apparently they did not tell the FBI. On their own, they sent it to some lab in Miami. And this is the first time we're hearing it on day 13 of this investigation. I find that to be quite disturbing because now this is a glove or the glove that was used in the crime. The one they found out in the woods a mile and a half, is conjecture and it could possibly be involved, but that someone threw it there. This one is in the crime scene. So this one would more likely bear fruit than the one that they found, a mile and a half from her house. So I want to play this from News Nation. This is a little bit disturbing if it is in fact true. It shows that two law enforcement agencies that should be working in tandem are not. Is there some jealousy from the Pima County Sheriff's Office that they don't want to play well in the sandbox with the FBI? FBI brings all the toys, all the money, all the know-how. Sheriff, you better cooperate with them if you want to solve this case. Let me play this from News Nation.
Point. They say it's a man with an average build, about 5'9", 5'10", and wearing an Ozark Trail hiker backpack. Now, despite the major developments in the last 24 hours, an FBI source telling News Nation they don't know if the agency or the sheriff is running this investigation. News Nation National Court.
Whoa. That's a huge, that's a huge thing to say because it's showing that there is some animosity going on, And look, this isn't unusual. This happens in all police jurisdictions. And we always bring up the Boston Marathon. And in the Boston Marathon bombing, I'll tell you the name of the police chief. Ed Davis was the chief of Boston. And whoever was pulling the strings on the FBI was very high level because we know that was a terrorist act and people lost their lives, lost limbs, all kinds of things. They requested the public to give and turn in their cell phone videos. And from those videos, they were able to identify Tamerlan and Zokhar Tsarnaev, who were the bombers. The pictures were obtained early in the investigation, and Ed Davis, the chief of the Boston police, says, let's get him out there. Let's put him right on television. The FBI said, no. I will not go to rehab. Who's that song by, what's her name? I want to go to rehab. No. Anyway, so they wouldn't put them out there. And connected with this was that the Tsarnaev brothers killed a campus security police officer. And perhaps if the police were forewarned that these were the perps we're looking for, they would have been a much, much higher alert that they had been identified. And I thought that was a little bit. And then these Tsarnaev brothers got into a huge, huge shootout with the Watertown police, and in which they were throwing improvised explosive devices at the police. It was like World War III on the streets of Massachusetts in Watertown. And luckily, the Watertown police won the gunfight. And one of the Tsarnaev brothers lived. The other one died en route to the hospital. But
Billy, you're describing a pissing match. We used to call that a pissing match in the NYPD.
Yeah, it happens with the NYPD and the FBI also. So it's not unusual. However, in a case like this, you need to really share the evidence. You cannot hold the evidence back. Mike, I can see your brain is overheating. What do you got to say?
No, I was thinking they find the glove the very first day, day one. They understand, thank God, it wasn't trash. They take it, they put it in a lab. That's probably a private lab that they're used to dealing with. I'm just trying to, look at it, maybe not a pissing match, but say, oh, there's a misunderstanding. They take it to the lab, send it to the lab that they maybe use and they found to be really reliable and quick and easy to work with. And then I don't think the FBI was involved for at least 48, 72 hours, at least that long. And so therefore the FBI comes in and they probably update them. And then the FBI is like, well, where's the glove? We'll send it to Virginia, or I'm not sure, Quantico probably.
Quantico, Virginia.
Yeah, that's it. So, and it's already gone. So I'm not sure if it's like animosity or the fact that Pima County didn't call in the FBI. They especially in a high profile case, once they found out who this person was, they should have just made a phone call to the local Tucson, Arizona FBI office and said, look, this is what we've got. This is what we found. We want to get this moving. Can you help us expedite this glove, search for DNA fingerprints? I'd like to think that's what did it. I'm not sure, but this was definitely a hiccup in the very beginning of the case where we could maybe be much farther along the road to finding this guy.
It's more than a hiccup, Mike. It's a big burp.
Oh, absolutely. And Billy, the glove being vouched at that time and sent to that lab, as Mike said, maybe the FBI wasn't involved at that point. So I don't find that as like a misstep. But the problem that occurs is if it's going to be re-examined by the FBI lab, which is the greatest in the world in Quantico, Virginia, could the evidence have been compromised because it was already examined? That's going to be the problem. And then, as we know, we always talk about CODIS, which is the DNA database, to see if the DNA is recovered. It could be put into the database to match up any people that it could in the database is people that are convicted of crimes, as well as crime scene individual, DNA that's recovered from crime scene. So it's almost like an extra step that we didn't want to happen. Unfortunately, it did. But let's just hope and pray that the evidence is not compromised, and it opens the door, as we talked about previously, with defense attorneys down the line to create doubt at a trial. So one of the things that we didn't want to happen, it happened, but let's move forward with it.
There's another thing, Phil. Another reason is that if there is DNA on the glove, sometimes there's a limited amount of DNA. Mm-hmm. And in the testing of that DNA, the lab could have used the best part of the DNA, and there may not be enough DNA for the FBI lab now to test because it was already tested.
Good point.
And I'm no scientist, but I know that exists. And what they also want to do is they want to submit the DNA to CODIS, the Combined DNA Indexing System, 2 categories of DNA, forensic DNA and offender DNA. Offender DNA is convicted offenders that go into the database without their consent because they're convicted offenders. Forensic is just DNA from crime scenes that hasn't been identified. So why would they do that? Because sometimes you can get DNA from one crime scene that matches another crime scene, and you can
put it together.
Yeah, you can put them together, and they've made an identification of an illegal alien who killed a woman last year by comparing crime scenes, one from L.A. with the crime scene that he was caught at murdering this woman. Anyway, let's get back to News Nation, their report on this. This goes a little bit more into this little, say, snafu between the FBI and Pima County.
Correspondent Jessica Cartalia is live for us in Tucson. And Jessica, it's not even confusion on who's the front man, right? There's also mass confusion on who has access to key evidence in the case.
Absolutely. Yeah, there seems to be a major disconnect here, Marky. FBI source telling our own Libby Dean that Chris Nanos, he's the Pima County sheriff, that he's blocking key evidence from the FBI. Sources say that key evidence includes that glove that they found on the side of a busy road, another glove in Nancy's home, as well as more DNA. And it's all being sent off to Florida for testing by the sheriff. The FBI will then have to test it again in Quantico. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has not held a press conference in more than a week. And FBI is saying that there is some sort of friction between the two departments, and it's unclear who's actually leading this investigation, the Sheriff's Department or the FBI. Now, the FBI yesterday released a description of what they're calling a suspect, described as a man approximately 5'10", 5'9", with an average build. In the next surveillance video that we saw that was released earlier this week, he was wearing a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack. Now, why is that significant? It's a product line that's specific to Walmart stores. So we reached out to Walmart to see if they are working with investigators. These developments all coming hours after investigators put up that tent at Nancy Guthrie's home. We were live on air when this happened. They brought in a forensic height chart. That's specialized equipment that can cause surveillance images to estimate a person's height. And the FBI is doubling its reward to $100,000 for any information leading to the location of Nancy Guthrie and or the arrest and conviction of the person involved in her disappearance. Residents in this neighborhood are being asked to share their surveillance camera footage of suspicious cars or people that they may have noticed all the way back to early January, a month before she disappeared. Initially, a resident told us, okay, January 11th, they were looking at some time frame between 9 and midnight. Now we're being told that they're looking at anything suspicious between January and February. So you're covering a month there in that. Federal and local officials have been going door to door as well, Marky. We know talking to people in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, also going back to Annie Guthrie's, where she had dinner just hours before she disappeared. We also have learned that investigators are analyzing additional pieces of evidence. But again, whether that evidence has to be sent to Florida.
You know, folks, I apologize. You hear other voices in the background because that she's outside and it's wall-to-wall journalists doing their reports in the same airspace as they are, and you're hearing all these. When you look at an overhead shot, it looks like, you know, journalism school. There's a million broadcasters all over the place, broadcasting trucks, and think of how that compromises the police work and compromises the crime scene. It does. It absolutely does. Apparently, when the police and the FBI go into the woods or go looking for things, there's journalists following them behind with camera crews, trashing, stomping, destroying evidence.
Where are the uniformed police officers or other FBI agents to say, listen, guys, back up. This is a frozen area. We're going to do a search. I couldn't believe exactly what you're describing, Bill. I saw the video yesterday of agents going through an area to search possibly for other gloves or whatever it is, searching for evidence. And right behind them, numerous journalists with cameras, with video equipment. I mean, come on, guys. How do you do a search like that? I never worked like that. We always were able to maintain an area we were going to search, keep people back, do what we had to do. And then once we're done, we take the crime scene tape down and, you know, anybody can go through there. But it's ridiculous what's going on with the amount of attention that the journalists are giving this case. I get it, but somebody's got to take control and keep these people at bay.
Phil, there is no control. That's a disgrace.
Terrible.
Too. And you know who should be controlling this? The
Sheriff's
County
Department.
Sheriff's Office.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You don't have personnel? Get kids out of the academy then. Get state police. Get someone to protect this damn crime scene. It's a disgrace. Absolute disgrace. You know?
I think that tells me that there's definitely a disconnect between the FBI and the local sheriff's office. And everybody's talking about it now in the last day or so. And I kind of got the feeling about it because I've worked on cases where the FBI came in, and historically, when I was on the job, FBI didn't like to share their information that they had when they were working on something. And it would always be, what do you got? We would tell them what we have, and then what you got? And they'd say, well, we don't have much at all. And I get it. You know, you don't want somebody coming into your turf and trying to tell you what to do. But in a case like this, you need the FBI just as much as they need you. And I think that there needs to be a joining of forces, which apparently there is. But, you know, you have these little pissing matches, and it's not good for the investigation.
Absolutely. Natalie loves Florida. Thank you so much for the 1999 super sticker. 84-year-old people with limited mobility do not just disappear, nor is it a slight test to kidnap or keep them. This case screams a known perp to the family. In my opinion, when solved, I believe we will be shocked. You know, Natalie, you're preaching to the choir. We said that right from the very beginning. We believe this is a known to person. And we all hope and pray that Nancy Guthrie is still alive. But it's 13 days. And, you know, she's got medical problems. She's 84 years old. We're hopeful and we're praying, but it's a long time to be. And, you know, again, Phil is saying, and many people are saying, this is not a kidnapping. Then what is it? Then what is it, Phil?
I mean, the only thing I could see is a home invasion gone wrong, something of that nature, or is she targeted to be murdered or something of that nature? The reason I don't put validity in it, I'm talking to other colleagues that I've worked with that I put a lot of, I know that they're great investigators, so I put a lot of weight into what they're saying. And everybody that I talk to, several colleagues, are saying this doesn't seem like a traditional kidnapping. It doesn't seem like a kidnapping at all. And I've explained it in the past. If you have a kidnapper, if they do a kidnapping, they contact family or they contact law enforcement with demands, with a ransom note. They try to do a proof of life and they try to do an exchange for money. None of that happened. There was these letters that were sent to news agencies and TMZ, and it just seemed very, very, I don't know, it didn't seem like it was that type of a situation to me. And when you look at the video of that bumbling fool that is the perpetrator in this case, he doesn't look like he's real. I mean, he's got the mask, he's got the gloves, he's prepared for that, but he looks like he's bumbling to me. Doesn't seem like a person like that would have the ability to pull off a kidnapping and ransom demand, in my opinion.
At Lottie Bronte 321, I saw that video over 5 hours ago. It's not that. No, nothing is new. There's nothing new. It's just there's some new happenings. There's some new information. Last night was the first time I found out that they had recovered a glove inside the crime scene. They were holding back that information, and that's from the chief of the Pima County Sheriff's Office, Chief Chris, Nanos.
Nanos.
And that's disturbing. That is disturbing because at this point, we should all be working together. We should all be trying to work toward a common goal. Let me go back to the News Nation video and then we'll talk a little more.
Before then coming back to the FBI and then going to Quantico could really prolong this investigation.
Okay, so working on some new developments here. Jess, thank you.
Oh my God, I wasn't quick enough to get him off the screen.
Can I make a quick point about something to do with the description of the perpetrator real quick?
Go ahead.
I saw a report where Jim Clemente, who was an FBI profiler, he brought to the attention on one of the videos that the perpetrator may have, it looks like in this area of his right hand, possibly a tattoo. So that's another piece of evidence that could be attributed to that video, that the perpetrator could have some type of a tattoo. And because it's coming from someone like Jim Clemente, who we had on the show, and we put a lot of weight behind his opinion on stuff, I think that's a good point. And, you know, they're asking for a video specifically. They mentioned January 11th. So they must have some information that something was going on January 11th, that they want to have video from that day. They said later on, they said from January 1st all the way to February 2nd, any video of suspicious things, but they specifically mentioned that January 11th. So they must have information of something suspicious on that day.
Phil, what is misunderstood? We said that immediately. The investigators have to go back because whoever did this was reconning the location.
Yes.
Was doing a dry run, was checking it out, was checking out entrances, exits. And look what the dope did. You know, when people, I sort of laugh when people go, was he a professional? I have never met a professional criminal in my life. And I did 27 years on the NYPD. Like when you see on TV these guys that plan everything, they're articulate, they studied, they're jewel thieves, they're this, they know how to circumvent alarms. I've never met a guy like that. I met the idiot that's in this video thousands of times, you know, but he obviously wasn't prepared. He walks in there, it was like, oh, gee, there's a ring camera. Let me go rip out a bush and cover it up. You know, like it was ridiculous, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, you know, if he was going to abduct this person or if he was going to do a home invasion, why on earth are you going to the front door? Why wouldn't you go to his side or back door? You know, where there's bushes that may hide you from any prying eyes, maybe a car driving by at night with its headlights. You don't want to be at the front door. That's like the dumbest place to be, because that's where people always put a ring camera, front and back, you know, but on the side of the house, maybe not. And this is a one-level house. So there's other ways to get in and out of that house. Yeah, he's bumbling. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's smart. He's smart and stupid at the same time. Smart enough to put on all kinds of gear, but stupid enough to be doing this. He's not the professional like person or group that actually got the heist from the Louvre, but they were caught within like a week and a half or something like that. You know, they had moxie. but they were known to the police and for what they did. They had only a certain number of people could probably pull that off. But in this case, this is low grade IQ, low grade ability, and this is not the mastermind who's masterminded this great, amazing kidnapping, and then also have the ability to thwart the U.S. government, law enforcement with Bitcoin, a Bitcoin currency transaction. This is not the case.
No, someone just told me about a sketch that was made by a Houston area sketch artist, and here it is.
Okay,
what do you think, guys? I mean, but that's not put out by law enforcement, so I don't know if it's going to be. And thank you, Lana Don't Die fan. Okay, I got the. So she asked, did you see the sketch put out by the famed Houston crime artist of what she believes the perp would look like? Thank you very much for that. That's it. This is the sketch from the Houston, and again, I don't know if this looks like the guy or not because most of his face is covered. And is this something that the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office is saying, oh, good job, because, large police departments have their own sketch units. They have sketch artists, and witnesses will sit down with them and they will grill the witnesses. Oh, what was cheekbone? What did his cheekbones look like? What was his forehead? Were his eyes close together or were they further apart? All kinds of questions so he can draw the sketch. In this, the sketch artist really just has this video and the stills made from this video to make a sketch. And, I can't say, oh, that's an outstanding sketch. I don't know. I don't know enough. Phil, what do you think?
To me, that person looks a little bit older than what I'm picturing in my mind as far as the perpetrator. That person in that sketch looks to me maybe 35, 40 years old. I'm thinking the perp is younger. I'm thinking 25 to maybe early 20s to early 30s. Let's use that range. And, when you describe sketch artists, yes, and there's programs today. I guess they even work with AI where a person can sit down with a law enforcement officer and they can put up pictures on a screen and say, is this the mustache? Is this the eyes? Is this? And they make a sketch. So that may have some of the physical characteristics in the face, the features, but to me, it just strikes me as older. That looks like like I said, that looks like a person maybe close to 35, 40 years old. I'm thinking younger, based on the movements of that person in that video that we see in front of Nancy Guthrie's house on the night of the disappearance.
Mike, all we have here, and, we're talking about what the investigators are working with. All right, we have the sketch, all right? We have the backpack, and now we got to canvas Walmart with the video. So this is an identification case, right? We now have this sketch that's not sanctioned, as far as I know, by law enforcement. So they're not going to use it. And the FBI will have their own sketch guy do one. And maybe now that someone else put out one, and this is allegedly a famed Houston area sketch artist, I'm sure the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Office, they're going to quickly get their own sketch out there because I think that's important. So we have that. Now we have the ransom notes, which we don't even know whether or not they're connected to this case. We don't know. We have TMZ every other day, Harvey Levin saying, oh, a guy says he knows who. Come on. So, the FBI, I don't even think is taking that seriously. Of course, they have to check it out as a lead, but I saw an FBI agent, a retired one, say, that's not even credible. So they won't just dismiss it. They will check it out. So all of these things, we're looking at an identification case. So the only hope is that we can connect science to the identification. And what we're talking about, of course, the glove inside that house and the glove recovered down that road. But if there is not enough DNA or that the perpetrator is not in CODIS, then we have to do something called investigative genetic genealogy. A lot more difficult, a lot more time consuming. Mike, since you are the most educated and professorial, I will lay that question on you.
Well, you're right, because if you got DNA from the glove, you load it up into CODIS, it will only get a hit if there is already like a fingerprint. It won't get hit unless there's already a one on file, DNA on file. If you don't have that, you got to go the investigative genetic genealogy route, which is going to take a long time, because now you have private companies that do the, like Ancestry and everybody else, and you're going to have to try to see if they could build a family tree. Maybe a second cousin 3 years ago to this person got uploaded DNA to see their saliva to figure out where their ancestors came from. It's a long shot, but you could do it, and that would help. But it's going to take a long time. The thing about the sketch is it may not be perfect, but if it just jogs somebody, like, because he's got a mustache and a goatee, and he's got, as Phil said, he's got that possible tattoo on his inside of his right wrist. That's kind of a unique thing. So those two things, it may not be the best, but if it is just good enough to jog somebody's memory to say that might be the guy, I think I know that guy. You hate to see a law enforcement agency like the Pima County Sheriff or the FBI taking their time with putting a sketch out. That there's, as Phil said, you may be able to have an AI program where you could remove the mask over the guy and get his basic, outline of his skull, and then you do some filling in. And I can't see why it's taken this long. So even though it's not sanctioned by any law enforcement agency, I'm glad it's done, because it just might, jog somebody's memory.
And in no way am I putting down the Houston sketch artist that drew
No,
this.
of course not.
I think it's great, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if it wasn't done by law enforcement, they're not going to use it. They're not going to
know.
sanction that and say, "Oh, this is the sketch." Unless an FBI agent does it or a Pima County detective does it, they're not going to put this out there as the sketch of a possible suspect in the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping. So,
Billy, the eyes look exactly like the eyes of the person in the video. So the eyes, I think they have right. Facial hair, you have bone structure. Perhaps maybe the actual hair is a little different. And if you make it a person, in my opinion, maybe looks a little bit younger. I think what Mike just said too, if you put all of the parameters together, the eyes, the facial hair, the tattoo on the wrist, perhaps we can get that call that we need.
the tattoo on the wrist, and I know from my experience with the NYPD, Rikers Island had the best tattoo database of anyone. And if you had an unusual tattoo, a detective could go to Rikers Island and meet with their investigators and say, "Look, I got a tattoo of a heart by his wrist," or whatever it is. And they would put that in the computer, and lo and behold, they might come up with it and say, "Oh, that's so-and-so," or any unusual tattoo. Criminals actually help the police by getting tattoos, get more and more tattoos, because they go into tattoo databases and it helps us identify you. The most frustrating thing in investigation, and Phil will tell you this too, is getting someone identified. It is not easy. It's an antiquated system. It's become made much easier by video. That video is everywhere on this earth, everywhere you go. Before that, when I was a commanding officer of the 2-4 and the 2-3 robbery unit, one on the west side, one on the east side on El Barrio, Spanish Harlem, there wasn't as much video out there. So you had to rely on a victim sitting at a computer screen, sometimes for hours. And once they passed a half hour, their brain turned to mush. They're not going to identify anyone. They saw way too many photos, and they're not going to pick anybody out. But when they would look at a computer giving us the parameters, just like they did yesterday, he's 5'9" to 5'10", medium build. I wish the FBI would have laid a weight to medium build. What does medium build being 5'9" to 5'10"? What weight? I said 185 to 200.
That sounds right to me.
Right. So they should have put a weight there. They said just medium build. So that's what would go into the computer for the NYPD. The victim would sit at the computer and literally look at hundreds and hundreds of photos. And sometimes they would actually, the funny thing is sometimes they'd sit at the computer and go, "I know that guy. I know him too. Oh, he lives in my building." You're just like, "Sorry, I didn't mean this to be a family reunion or a friend's reunion," but that's just the way it is, because the people.
Billy, did they have in Manhattan? Did they have a catch unit? Because we had.
They did, but that became antiquated, and they didn't really use that anymore. But they would sit down at the computer, and if they pick someone out of the computer, the detective would say, okay, if you had to give that on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give it as it's the guy?
Right.
And sometimes they would say, oh, that's a 10. And the detective would go, okay. And then the next step that the detective would do, he would run the person to see if it was possible that they did the robbery. And if the guy was in Rikers Island during the robbery, there was no chance that he did, or if he's upstate. So that would be the next check. And he'd go, you said it was a 10. The guy's in Rikers, or the guy's in Coxsackie upstate. So he definitely didn't do the robbery. So that was like investigation 101. So all of these investigation cases are frustrating. They're very, very difficult. And we were hoping that science would give us the answer here. DNA, a fingerprint, blood evidence, something like that. So far, it has not. Mike, you're the professor. Give us some ideas.
Yeah, Bill, at this point, this is the old, we got to hope that DNA maybe that is in the glove in the crime scene. If there is, maybe there was a second glove they wore over their hands. We don't know, but we got to hope. That's a huge deal. If we can't get anything there, there's no match. The IgG is going to take months at the very least. So we might not catch that person in that time frame. But right now, as you said, you and Phil said many times, this investigation is an art and a science. And but you got to come up with a name. If you don't have a name or an address or a license plate of that, I think it's a gray van they're looking for, then you're still at square one in many ways. But if you've got a license plate or a better description of that perp, or you've got an address or a phone number, just something to work with, you can move
Mike,
forward.
I think that's why they're going back to January 11th.
Yeah.
To try to check video. That's because the perpetrators or perps could have been doing a recon,
Right.
could have been checking out, doing dry runs on the job that they intended to do on January 31st. So that is, and again, who did people just think of this yesterday or the day before? What investigative minds are working on this case? It seems that a lot of things you have to try. And sometimes you put your heads together, and as Phil would say, it's called spitballing. I used to call it hypothesizing and theorizing. You put all your investigative minds together, and you come up with ideas. And sometimes the big boss running the investigation, he's clueless, and you have to tell him what and why you're doing it. He's not boots on the ground. And I always said when I was working these big cases, listen to the detectives. Listen to what the detectives are saying, because they're the ones that ultimately are going to grab the guy. They're the ones that are going to interview the guy. They're the ones that are going to arrest the guy. And they're the ones that are going to do the follow-up on the case and testify in court. James C5022 at Sarge, Brian Enton just put out a shorts about Pima County Sheriff responds to holding evidence. I did see it, James, and I think it was covered a little more so in the other News Nation report. This is something that we really are just finding out about. I was just finding out about the glove found inside the house. I think last night when I was looking through this, I was like, oh no, that's crazy. They've had this, and that if there's ever going to be a glove that has DNA on it, it's the one found inside that crime scene. Phil.
Yeah, Billy, you're exactly right. The most important thing I think we've been told about is the evidence of this glove inside the house. I mean, if it's inside the house, I don't think that Nancy Guthrie is wearing gloves in that type of a climate to begin with. We don't know what kind of a glove it is. It sounds like it's a like an elastic glove. So if it's elastic glove found inside the home where a possible kidnapping takes place, we're going to assume that that's the glove from one of the criminals, one of the people, one of the perpetrators. So it's probably one of the most important pieces of evidence, and the chances of there being DNA in it are very great. We talked about the fact that if it's a person wearing it, the minute they put it on, they've touched DNA inside that glove. Perhaps possibly a hair or a fingerprint as well, if it's examined the proper way. So with all of that said, that's probably one of the most important pieces of evidence that has been revealed from the case. And with regard to the vehicle and talking about January 11th, as we know from the Koberger case, once they have a video of a vehicle, they can determine the make, the model, and the color, and they can put that out there. And that was key to solving the Kohlberger case. So I think that that's probably what they're looking for. They're looking for video of a vehicle that was possibly suspicious. If they link this vehicle to the fact that it was around at the same time that the abduction and the incident took place, then they're going to put that out there. They're going to come up with, like I said, a year, make, and model, and it's going to narrow down the search for the perpetrators in this case. And as we know from past cases, I just mentioned Kohlberger, it led to a successful conclusion of the case.
Absolutely. This is from ABC News.
Appearance of Nancy Guthrie. The FBI and law enforcement were back at Nancy Guthrie's home in Tucson today. Take a look. A white tent was put up at the front door of the home for a time. The FBI could be seen carrying a height chart. You can see it right there on the far right-hand side of your screen, trying to determine the height and weight of the man seen at that front door. And just moments ago, before we came on the air tonight, authorities revealing the man was approximately 5'9" or 5'10", based on measurements and comparisons made today at the home. Of course, that's where the chilling surveillance video was captured of that armed masked man. Also, moments ago, authorities releasing this image of the backpack they say he was wearing, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack. And tonight, investigators now analyzing 2 black gloves found not far from Nancy Guthrie's home. You can hear agents there saying, is that a glove on the ground? And this evening, what the sheriff is now asking of everyone within 2 miles of Nancy Guthrie's home. And the FBI just moments ago doubling the reward now for information leading to Nancy Guthrie or her captor to $100,000. Our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky, leading us off tonight from Tucson.
Tonight, for the first time since Nancy Guthrie was abducted 12 days ago, the FBI erecting a white tent outside her front door. Investigators worked inside for about an hour before leaving with a large case marked video forensics. It's the same spot where an armed masked man was seen on chilling doorbell video. They're now trying to build a physical profile using the height of the archway to compare to the man's height and the floor tiles to measure his feet. You could see the FBI today holding a height chart.
They're going to be able to very closely estimate his full body size, most likely including his weight.
And late today, the FBI described the suspect as a male between 5'9" and 5'10" with an average build and confirmed he was wearing a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack. Tonight, investigators are also analyzing 2 black gloves the sheriff said were found on the side of the road near Nancy Guthrie's home. The New York Post was there when 1 glove was recovered. Both gloves are now being tested for DNA and blood after drops of Nancy Guthrie's blood were found on her front porch. Investigators are now asking neighbors within a 2-mile radius and beyond to share home security camera footage from January 1st, a month before the abduction, to February 2nd, the day after she was abducted, seeking images of anything during those weeks out of the ordinary or important to our investigation. One neighbor saying he went through his video looking to see if there was anything suspicious.
We went through my cameras. We didn't find any vehicles moving at that time in front of my house.
Tonight, police are now indicating there was a suspicious vehicle on the street between 9:30 and 11 a.m. on January 31st, the day before Nancy Guthrie was taken. In addition to asking neighbors for videos from the last month, authorities also appearing to look at this specific window of time.
There must be something in there that they've seen or some other indicator that shows that potentially somebody could have been casing the place.
Another week of this nightmare.
12 days into what Savannah Guthrie has called a nightmare. She is now sharing home movies from her childhood with her mother, writing on Instagram, "Our lovely mom, we will never give up on her." A window into her private pain as she continues to pray for the return of her beloved mother, 84 years old with a pacemaker and fragile health. They are not giving up hope. One of Nancy Guthrie's friends, Lupita Murillo, saying Nancy Guthrie is a warm, caring, devoted mother and grandmother.
She was the kindest, warmest, the most giving person I've ever met, and was passed on to her daughter.
She referred to her in the past tense. Did you catch that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or Savannah as well, because that's how Savannah is.
Again, David, just moments ago, the FBI described the suspect in Nancy Guthrie's abduction as a male, 5'9" to 5'10" of average build, and they said he was carrying this kind of backpack. They've doubled the reward now for information to $100,000. David, this investigation is getting on 2 weeks, and sources close to the inner circle of family and friends around Savannah Guthrie are describing a growing sense of frustration with the pace of the investigation and the limited amount of information coming from the authorities.
So, again, You can't rush the investigation. I guess I would be frustrated too. From the chat at Lana Don't Die Fan, thank you for the 1999 super sticker. Also from Newsweek article, an interesting Lois Gibson, sketch artist, retired from Houston PD in 2021, and she is from the Guinness Book of World Records, holding the record for world's most successful forensic artist. And I guess we have to give her some play here, that she is the real deal. I didn't know all that about her, but I'm just saying law enforcement agencies are funny. They want to use their own, well, not funny, they want to use their own people. And if this sketch results in the perpetrator being identified, if it was brought up in court, who drew this sketch, and it wasn't a police personnel person, they could have a problem with that, Phil.
Wouldn't it be funny though if the NYPD, the FBI and the sheriff's office do come up with a sketch and it looks similar to that? I think that would put a lot more credence into the sketch that this artist put out. So I'm waiting to see a colorized photo or a colorized video of the incident that takes place outside the door with the masked individual, and a sketch, because they say the technology exists. I saw an FBI agent yesterday on cable news talking about it, saying that the technology exists, that they can take that video and from the facial structure come up with some type of a rendition of what we think the perpetrator behind the mask is going to look like. And I think it would be very, very telling if the sketch that they come out with looks somewhat similar to this sketch that's in front of us right here.
You know, I think that you would want, if you were family, for example, you would want more information coming out from law enforcement and from the FBI. However, we also know that even from following the Idaho 4 case, and of course the perpetrator, Brian Koberger, who was ultimately arrested and pled guilty to the murder of those 4 students at the University of Idaho on November 13th. And I believe that was 2022, Mike?
22.
Yes.
2022. It just seems that it's, you know, that case we learned so much from. We really did. And so they, in the beginning, my whole point here was they told a lot, they gave a lot of information to the family members, and it all leaked out. And as a result of that, the judge slapped a gag order and allowed almost no information to come out. And it was very frustrating. But in this case, I just don't believe they have a lot of really new pertinent information that would help the family. And look, when we talk about the amount of press and broadcast journalists that are out there, you know, they tend to make up stuff when there is no forthcoming new information coming from law enforcement. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, you know, the FBI is notoriously, they keep their cards close to the vest. They're anally retentive. And, you know, once burned, twice shy. We realized something with the Koberger case was that, you know, there was so much media attention. If there was some sort of, results that were from the autopsy or some sort of lab results, and they were told to the family by law enforcement to let them, comfort them, to let them know, look, we're moving forward. This is moving forward. Don't pay attention to anything. If they talked to someone and just mentioned one sentence, it was broadcast all over the place, and that hurts the investigation, and it makes the law enforcement, you know, twice shy. That we don't really want to talk to the family because we don't want this stuff released because it's directly. It may directly contradict where we go in the future because we don't know. We're giving you information now, but it might turn out to be a dead end. And we go here, but now we've got 2 stories now, and they're incongruent. So therefore, yeah, I understand that the family here is going to, the Guthrie family is probably very, very frustrated. But, you know, in a way, just because there's so much media probably trying to contact them every single day, you know, loose lips sink ships kind of situation. In a way, I don't blame the FBI for being very tight-lipped.
I don't blame him either. Lou Lemoracco from the chat. Thank you, Lou, for the $10 super sticker. Cannon. Talking Heads got it wrong again. STFU. If you guys don't know what that means, I won't spell it out. Misleading the public. Absolutely not a black strap across the suspect's chest, part of the jacket design. You know, Lou, there's so much information that some of it is going to be proven to be wrong. And they have to check out every single lead. Imagine from what I heard, I think I read that there was 13,000 tips so far. And you got to check out every single one of them. Think about the amount of personnel that you need to check out 13,000 leads. And if they don't think a certain lead is good, they're not going to give it a great deal of attention. They're supposed to close it out in some way. Phil, you know all about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, every lead needs to be checked out. The Carlos guy who was detained a couple of nights ago, that came in through an FBI lead is what we're being told. So that's just an example of some of the stuff that they have to do. They have to follow it up. They thought because he fit the physical description of the person that's seen on the video, they put a lot of credence into it. They put a lot of weight into it, and they did what they did. They detained him for a period of time. They executed a search warrant. Turns out that they cleared him from being involved in the case, but it's one of the steps that has to be taken with regard to the investigation at hand. I think Lou Lemaraco brings up a very good point in this case. The video is showing something black across his chest, and somebody said it's a black strap from the backpack, but Lou says no, it's part of the shirt. This is why we need a better colorized photo of the perpetrator in that case. I think it's going to make it a lot more clearer, and the technology definitely exists that they can colorize that photo. That needs to be done. A press conference needs to be done. We need to update the public on what's going on. We called for it in the last couple of days. This is something that we need to be done only just to stop all the conspiracy theories. They're going into the weeds. And something like Lou brought up, perhaps they can say, we believe that the black stripe across his shirt is part of his clothing and not part of the backpack. Different things of that nature. That's something that I think is very important. We talked about the reward. Bonnie Phelps, 9481, put in the chat, we believe that you guys were instrumental in getting the reward doubled. We've been calling for a large reward for days now, and we think the family was willing to part with up to $6 million for a ransom, put up a large amount of money, $1 million or something of that nature, to get the recovery of Nancy Guthrie. You set the parameters. You don't have to go through law enforcement. The family can set the parameters of how it's going to be paid. Usual rewards in cases put out by law enforcement agencies and FBI, they usually state leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator at hand. We want to just recover Nancy Guthrie. Let's put that out there. I think that might have a big impact on this case.
Phil, there's so much information and not all of it is correct. And so you had called yesterday for another press conference. But the press conferences weren't all that successful either. I think that they need a real sort of PR person, public relations, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, whatever rank the person is, that knows how to do a accurate press conference and let everyone know. First thing you should have to say is, I want you to know that the information I'm giving you is preliminary and subject to change.
Exactly.
You have to always have that disclaimer in every single press conference. I think in the NYPD, that is how they start every single press conference. I want everyone to know that the information that we are giving you right now is preliminary and is subject to change.
Exactly.
This way, they can't hold you to things. And also, the press sometimes tries to give gotcha questions, even in these press conferences. And the person that's conducting the press conference has to have the skill to know, no, I'm not answering that. That could compromise the investigation. Thank you for your question, but that's not something. We don't want to disseminate that information because it could absolutely hurt the investigation. This is
Bill, they could just do an update. They don't have to do a question and answer. Do an update press conference where they give out the information, say exactly what you said. This is preliminary, subject to change. Here's what we're working on, or these are the current things, and walk away from the podium. End of story. I think that would help a lot.
Absolutely. This is Hannity from Fox.
Just doubled the reward for information leading to Nancy Guthrie or anyone involved in her kidnapping, now to $100,000. The Bureau also releasing more details on the masked intruder seen here at Nancy Guthrie's front door. The FBI's Operational Technology Division is describing this person, a male, approximately 5'9" or 5'10", with an average build. The bag that he's wearing has been identified as a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack. pictured right there. Now, this brings us to the video obtained by TMZ. This was recorded by a Ring camera 5 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's home on the very same morning that she was abducted. It shows a man with a similar backpack at 1:52 a.m. But now, breaking NBC News reporting, authorities have cleared this man from being involved in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Ari Levin will join us in a moment. We'll get his take on all of that. Also, more communication that TMZ got today. But breaking tonight, Reuters now reporting that Pima County Sheriff, who has jurisdiction over the case, is actively blocking and delaying investigators at the FBI from accessing very critical evidence. I've been hinting at this. I'm saying we're going to get to this. I didn't want to engage in this discussion too deeply in the hopes that they would finally get to work together. But it's a much deeper story than people know. Here with more and the new evidence found inside the Guthrie home, the host of Fox News at Night, right here on Fox, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 o'clock on the West Coast. Trace Gallagher. Trace.
Yeah, and Sean, a high-level source from the FBI has confirmed that story to me. We learned that Pima County Sheriff is blocking key evidence to the FBI. What happened was there was DNA found inside Nancy Guthrie's house. We knew about that part. They also found a glove inside the house. The FBI wanted that evidence sent to Quantico for analysis, but the Pima County Sheriff's Office decided to send it to an alternate lab in Florida. So the key thing here is, yes, there is a dispute on that because the FBI believes they're going to have to take that glove and resend it to Quantico for analysis. So you have the headbutting between the Sheriff's Department and the FBI. But the big news of this, really, Sean, is the fact that there was a glove found inside Nancy Guthrie's house. We don't have any context on the glove. We don't know if it's Nancy Guthrie's. We don't know if it belongs to somebody else. But the fact that it's being analyzed at a lab in Florida and that the FBI also wants to analyze it is in itself very critical. We should note that the Pima County Sheriff's Office is now asking that, you know, the residents here in the Catalina foothills within a 2-mile radius send in all the videotape they can that might be important. They're talking the window from January 1st to February 2nd, which is a day after Nancy Guthrie disappeared. They want cars driving by. They want cars that are parked, people that are driving by, anything that might be out of the ordinary. You were mentioning, Sean, that TMZ video that showed the guy about 5 miles away from here at the very same time that the intruder was walking up to Nancy Guthrie's doorstep. That video was sent in to TMZ, but that's kind of what the Sheriff's Department, the FBI, are looking for, anything unusual. That person has apparently been cleared, reportedly been cleared, but that's kind of what they're looking for. We talked to some people who told us that the law enforcement officers had been to their house and they were asking them what kind of cars they own, what kind of cars they drive. This appears to be part of the process of elimination where you know what cars are driving in and out, and what you want to find is the unusual traffic, oddball traffic that might be driving in and out in case some suspicious activity is happening. But the big news out of here tonight, Sean, that we're going to focus on a lot is the fact that there is this glove. There is this dispute, this glove, and that, you know, things might be heating back up in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, Sean.
So we said early on, let me just get that off. We said early on that science was going to solve this case, and we thought that digital evidence, forensic evidence, the victimology, the lifestyle, the people in Nancy Guthrie's life. And so far, 13 days have gone by, and we haven't seen an arrest in this case. We don't know where Nancy Guthrie is. And it would seem, you know, the press is really just, they're shit stirrers, and you can see they're doing that right now. They are definitely shit stirring, and that because there's nothing new really going on. So they want to create a story. And if they, I don't know if they let that go, would it be a story? I don't know. But yeah, this happens between law enforcement. They bang heads jurisdictionally. The FBI comes in with the big guns and the big money and the shiny shoes and the more expensive suits, and the local law enforcement, local sheriff's office, it's their case. It's their case. So they're holding like that. We're in charge of this. I am the boss, you know, and it gets like that in law enforcement. There's no doubt we've seen it on the NYPD, except the NYPD, if it goes up to the PC, he can usually slap out whatever law enforcement organization tries to one up the NYPD. Then at least Commissioner Kelly, he had tremendous power, and he frequently banged heads with the FBI. But this is a smaller jurisdiction. I think they should play in the sandbox together. They should work together, because that's the only way you're going to come up with a positive conclusion to this case. Phil.
Yeah, Billy, I know from my previous experience working alongside the FBI on specific cases, there were times when we tried to keep our stuff close to the vest because historically we know that they didn't like to share information. But when it came to, I'm going to reference a terrorist case that took place before 9/11, we worked together. We didn't hold anything back. We shared information with the FBI. They shared the information with us. This was probably before the 93 World Trade Center bombing. It was had to do with terrorists that were raising money for terrorist activities. And so we had no problem working together on a case like that. When they walked into our office and said, what do you know about this Russian organized crime homicide? And we knew stuff on it. And we would say, well, what do you know? And they didn't want to share information. I could understand, you know, maybe holding back information. But on a case like this, where we have such a high profile, you know, Savannah Guthrie is a celebrity, a high profile celebrity. This is her mom. The whole country and many parts of the world are really plugged into this case. I can't see that happening in this case at this point. Perhaps in the first day or two, like you said, you know, sheriff's office wanted to flex their muscles and say, we're in charge of the case. I get that. But now, based on what's going on, they need to work together. They need to put their heads together. And we know the FBI has the greatest technology in the world, the greatest investigators in the world, the greatest lab in Quantico, Virginia for examination of forensic evidence. And with regard to all the things that are going to go on, with regard to cell phones and computers, and, you know, in the Rex Heuermann case, which is the Gilgo Beach case, they were able to, from an FBI computer, go into his computer and see what he was downloading and the searches that he was doing. So with technology like that, that only exists within the FBI as far as we know. So I would say that we need the FBI in this case more than the sheriff's office is needed. So they need to work together, and I think that they are. And let's get all of this. It's all bullshit. Let's put all the egos aside. Let's get Nancy Guthrie returned to her family. That's the case at hand. And let's put some people in handcuffs.
100%. And this is Harvey Levin going on, Sean Hannity. And we'll comment on this after this is played.
Tonight's new details, the host of Crime Stories on Fox 1, Nancy Grace. All right, we have both been kind of skirting around the issue. We have talked about it privately. I have told you my FBI sources were very clear to me that local authorities, and I'm not talking about rank and file, I want to be very clear. The leadership did not want them there. There has been a turf war. There has been this feeling of bigfooting. But taking a glove and sending it to a private lab in Florida instead of the FBI headquarters in Quantico, really?
There are cases where DNA is sent to a particular lab, a specialty lab, a lab that could have an expertise in diluted, destroyed, old, degenerated DNA. But even if that's why he's hanging his hat on an excuse to send it to a private lab in Florida, they don't have anything that the FBI doesn't have. So that's not going to wash. And I want to tell you something, Sean. I've tried many, many DNA cases. I've tried many cases without DNA. You can use up DNA if you have a small amount, which comes from touch DNA. It's not like blood or sperm where you may have a lot of DNA and a very small amount of fluid, but you have a lot of DNA. Touch DNA, no. If there is it hurts me to think of this. If there is a small amount of DNA inside one of those gloves and it is sent to a lab for testing, that DNA could be used up in the testing. It's very hard to regenerate DNA for testing purposes. So what I'm saying is, if that lab in Florida uses up that touch DNA, it's over. Does he not realize what he is risking? He needs to go back to his basketball game and let the feds handle this in Quantico. But it's done. It is done. And I can't tell you the difference DNA makes in a case. That's the number one thing right now. Second is the vehicle, trucks. The feds are looking for trucks. A gray truck in particular. They're asking everyone within a 2-mile radius to pull video. And have they seen a truck? Have they seen a gray truck? And do they own a truck? And do they know somebody that does own a truck? Why did they focus on a truck? Because apparently a truck has been picked up on video surveillance around questionable times. Now, if you
Phil and Mike, initially there was a suspicious white van, and now all of a sudden it's a gray truck. But why did it take to day 13 to come up with this suspicious gray truck, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, early on, we heard that it was a white van, and we heard that it was also involved, stopped at a gas station somewhere near in that vicinity. Maybe the lighting was poor. Maybe it was an old security video where under the lights, the color looked slightly different. It was white, now it's gray. And does she, when she's, now I'm not a big Nancy Grace fan, but when she says truck, does she mean van? Or does she mean something like a pickup truck? Does she mean something like a utility truck? So I'm not sure exactly what she's saying, or is the wording really accurate? But the fact is they have seen at least one, maybe two. Maybe there's two separate ones, a white van and a gray, some sort of gray truck that's been driving around the area, and they want to know about it. That's good detective work, and it's going to take a while to get it. But
that's why they need a press conference, Mike. That's why they got to be more exact with this stuff.
Right. Because somebody says a vehicle, that doesn't know. You don't know if it's a car, a truck, a van, a camper. People use words differently, so they need to be much more accurate in the description to help the public.
Mike, early in the Koberger case, they said they were looking for a white Hyundai Elantra, and they didn't have the year, but that was the car.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then through that, they figured out who owned it. And, the owner of it was a student at Washington State University. It turned out it was Brian Koberger. Right. So, yes, as you say, they need to be much more specific. And there's a communication problem on this case. And law enforcement must use the public to help them solve crime. They must absolutely. And the tool to do that is the media. And as I said, law enforcement needs to use the media. Do not have the media use law enforcement. Right now, the media is using law enforcement. It almost seems like the media is trying to run this case. That's not the way it should be. And the problem is the messaging. And I would give the Pima County Sheriff's Office a D- in messaging on this case. Phil.
Yeah. I mean, we've been calling for another press conference and update for the last couple of days. And I'm so glad that Mike brought this up. This is what we need further details for. The FBI or someone in the sheriff's office putting out a gray truck. Is it a truck? Is it a van? Describe it a little better. I'm going to go back to the Gilgo Beach case. There was a very unique vehicle that was owned by Rex Human. It was a Chevy Avalanche, and it was a dark green. Very, very unique. But once that was out there, it led to, they did a lawman search, and they found out that Rex Human owned that.
Except Phil, that was in the case folder for 12 years. And
we know that part of it. But with regard to this case, if we had a better idea of the vehicle in question, when they say a truck could mean so many things. It could mean a pickup truck, could be a delivery truck, could be a van. We need a little more specifics. And this is why I've been calling, and we've been calling for an updated press conference. I mean, this is not too much to ask for. And again, it has to be one that maybe they just put out some information and they don't take questions. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a funny comment from the chat. Every once in a while, we need some comic relief. At Jennifer Frederick 9475, I always wondered if it was someone in the FBI or one of Nanos' officers that gifted Nanos those basketball tickets to get him out of their way.
That's a good one. That's
That's pretty funny. You know, when we saw that, when we heard that he was at a basketball game during this investigation, that was a bad decision, a real bad look for the allegedly the head of this major national investigation to be seen at a basketball game in the midst of this huge investigation. Just whether or not he needed time off, he needed a break, that's immaterial. He is the face of this investigation, and it just didn't look good that he was attending a basketball game.
Bill, you and I were saying even before the basketball game, this guy's doing way too many interviews right in the beginning. And he was not only doing interviews, he was being like cross-examined. He was being interrogated, and he was giving out way too much information. We called that day 1 or 2 that we started covering this case. And then you see him at a basketball game. Well, you know, the poor Guthrie family, Savannah and her siblings are pouring their hearts out trying to recover them. I mean, I can't even imagine what these people are going through. It was a bad look. And listen, I know that maybe you got to pull yourself out of it at some point and take a breather. I get it. But you're going to go to a nationally televised basketball game? That was really a bad choice on his part.
Absolutely. At Lady Jane C, need a press conference, especially with this news saying the sheriff is not cooperating with the feds. Yeah, I think you're right. At Laylo _IO, did they bring in dogs early on in the investigation? Yeah, they had dogs. They had. Don't let Mike answer this one. They had bloodhounds. They had cadaver dogs. They had all kinds of dogs, but now they haven't brought them back out, as far as I can tell. But look, every resource is being used. And, you know, and we always talk about it. We say it almost redundantly. When you hit a brick wall in an investigation, you get all your investigators together and you all talk together. You spitball, you hypothesize, you theorize, and you start over. You just start over. And I know it's hard to do. And who knows, maybe they're going in the wrong direction. Maybe they need to change direction. And no investigator or no boss who's running a major investigation wants to hear a detective say, boss, we got to change direction. And a lot of them, you know, they'll try to pull out the hair that they don't have out of their head. But it's sometimes that's what's necessary. Everyone on this case, you can get talking heads from all over this world, retired FBI this, retired chief that, retired detective from NYPD, retired detective from Los Angeles. Everyone universally is admitting that this case is baffling, that it's not a clear, true kidnapping. Something else is going on here, but no one could put their finger on it. No one could say, you know, and most people would agree that this looks like an inside job. This looks like a known to Nancy Guthrie. This looks like someone that knows this area. All of those things are true, but yet here we are 13 days into this case, and it doesn't seem like they're any closer to finding Nancy Guthrie than they were on January 31st, the night that she went missing. Well, actually, they didn't report it until the next day, which was December 1st, February 1st. So, you know, it's a little bit upsetting. And again, part of it is the miscommunication. Mike, you can put that up on the scoreboard for me. That I made a mistake with the date.
It's okay.
We're not perfect, guys. We're not perfect.
As long as we're marking up on each other's mistakes. This little
well, I got to highlight a comment because this is going to be so relevant to stuff that you've said in the past and I've said in the past. It's Coptional R4R says, I recently heard FBI doesn't investigate murders much, that murders are typically investigated by local law enforcement. Anyone know if that's true? 100% true. But that does not mean that we don't need the help of the FBI in this particular case or in any case. But generally, murders are handled and investigated and solved by local law enforcement. They don't have a whole lot of experience investigating murders per se, but in this particular case, we do believe that everybody should play nice in the sandbox together, as Billy has said. But I'm so glad that somebody put that up because we say that many times ad nauseum.
No, look, it's so true. And Phil, you hit it right on the head. Murder cases are local. It's the local police. And with certain factors, they will bring the FBI in. And you don't want to, when it's a major case like this, with lots of moving parts, you don't want to turn down the help from the FBI because they have the resources, they have the technology, they have the science, they have the people. Bring them in because, as you see, even with their help, we're 13 days in, and this case is no closer to being solved. It appears. But, major investigations, homicide investigations, you just need one call. You just need one piece of evidence. You just need one person that saw something, and the whole case can just blow up and you could solve it. But so far, we're not getting that very, very important piece of evidence. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, as you said earlier, it looks like the media is driving the public tenor of the investigation. And that's sad. And in the absence, as Phil said, of a press conference reassuring people that the investigation is progressing, it makes the public really wonder, like, what's the FBI really doing? And we've worked with different law enforcement agencies. We know that this case is moving forward, and I really believe that we will get an answer to what actually happened. And look, Harvey Levin and Sean Hannity, they have to fill their time, but to report on maybe interagency squabbles and things like that, I think that's unprofessional, and that really does destroy the public's perception of the ability of these two agencies. And I think it's a total disservice. But I think the public should be assured that this case is moving forward, and it's moving forward slowly, but it is moving forward.
100%. Phil, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you were working this case right now and we are where we are today, tell me what you would do.
Number one, colorize the video, get some still photos colorized. Number two, come up with technology that can tell us what the perpetrator looks behind the mask. Number three is I would be holding a press conference this afternoon. I'd be talking about some of the things that were being done, maybe some of the stuff that didn't pan out. Number four, I'd be encouraging the family, as I said numerous times, to put up a large reward. And the last thing I'd probably do is, again, restate video evidence that happened in the area, vehicles that were suspicious. I would be more specific about this truck. And those are just some of the things that first come to mind. I'm sure if I sat down and I really looked at the case folder, I'd come up with some other strategies that I'd want to do. And what we just did between me and you and Mike is what law enforcement officers should be doing in the task force. At the end of a day or the end of a tour, whatever it is, we start to compare notes. I call it spitballing. And this is how we move forward in the cases. And we know that if we start to go in a direction and things start to look good, like, for instance, that tip that came in about Carlos, it started to look good when they said, hey, look at this. He's a delivery driver. Well, okay, that kind of fits into this. He could have had access to the area. Now he fits the physical description. That's why I think they went forward with that. And there were some detractors that were saying, oh, they violated his rights. They had to follow that up. So with that said, those are the things that I would do. And I think that in the squad room or wherever this task force is having their home base, these are the things that will take place between the FBI and the sheriff's office. And like you said earlier, Billy, the detectives and the people that are doing the legwork are going to have the best feel for how they should move forward and how they're going to analyze the things that are taking place and decide whether or not, this is evidence, or this is a good direction to go in, or this has nothing to do with it.
I 100% agree with you, is that they have to be much more clear and concise with what type and color, make, model, year of the truck they're looking for. To just throw out a generic, we're looking for a gray truck. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? And whose idea was
much too vague.
Well, exactly. Ridiculously vague. All right. You must have an idea of what the gray truck that you're looking for looks like, the make, the model, the year, whether it's new, whether it's old. When did you see it? Mornings, nights? All of those things are important because they're also asking homeowners to look through their Ring camera video to see if they see it. What are you telling them then? What are they looking for? Help them and they'll help you. help. That's a good expression. Help them and they'll help you. Absolutely. And we always, if you see something, say something. You want them to say something, you have to give them more information. Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Bill, we are moving along and it's going to take a while, but I think the biggest thing that kind of was the stumbling block, perhaps for law enforcement in the past, and even definitely for the public and the media, was the Bitcoin kind of contact information and looking like it was a ransom. And at this point, we understand this is not a typical kind of kidnapping where the perpetrators, once they provide proof of life, they want to arrange to get the money as fast as possible and get out of town because that's their only ability to get away with this crime. It's gone way too long. This is absolutely an inside job, and it was not a kidnapping. It's something else that was made to look like a kidnapping.
Yeah, I think there's many people think that. Many people feel that. Many retired FBI agents that have been on these shows as talking heads, but everyone perhaps or many people can agree that that's not what it is. But then what is it? What are you telling us it is? Is it a family dispute? Is it a murder for her life insurance? I'd like to know how much life insurance she has. Does she have a huge policy? What are her assets? One of the things that a district attorney would be doing right now would be doing a financial check on Nancy Guthrie to see what her assets are, to see, look at her will. Is there anyone in her will that wasn't listed? That's a family member, those are just things that informationally that we need. And I don't know. None of us know if those type of checks have been done. And again, we felt very confidently early on this investigation that the answer to this case would be in the victimology of Nancy Guthrie. And 13 days in, so far, we're not seeing that. It doesn't mean it's not there, but we're not seeing that right now. Phil, your final thoughts.
I want to just piggyback what Mike just said. That's a very good point that Mike made, that perhaps this is not what we thought it was. Perhaps this was a targeted murder and they threw a red herring and make it look like a kidnapping to throw off investigators. One other quick thing that I want to point out from the chat. Banfield, this is Becky Love 742. Banfield disclosed the old guard have left the FBI gumshoes are without experience. Based on the video that I saw yesterday, when they were doing a search in an area it looked like the desert area, somewhere in the area close to this investigation, and you had the press right behind them, I would have to agree with that. My last thing that I'm going to say about my closing thoughts today, we have to keep thoughts and prayers for this family and for the safe return of Nancy Guthrie. However, I think as the days go on, the chances that she's recovered intact is not good. And let's just hope for a larger reward and a press conference from the law enforcement that is investigating this case.
Absolutely. Mike, before I go to you, I just want to read something from the chat at Mudcat 7611. Have they even disclosed the time frame for neighbors to review their security cameras to assist in capturing possible suspect vehicle? I think they just go back to January. Was it 11th?
The specific date was January 11th, but they said anything from January 1st to February 2nd. But they did mention January 11th for some reason. That tells me there's some type of information that there was something suspicious on that day.
And Phil, that's a long time to ask someone to go review their Ring cameras for that period.
Oh, that's a painstaking.
Oh yeah, and so to ask that is a big ask. Mike, the man of reason, the professor at Albertus Magnus, your final thoughts.
I just believe that on the ground level, the deputies and the FBI agents probably work together. We're all law enforcement, no matter what agency you're from. Doesn't matter. Cops helping each other, and I'm sad that that maybe politics at a higher level, kind of interrupted the beginning of the flow of this case. But I think the public should be reassured that everybody on the ground who's actually rolling up their sleeves and covering the area, everybody's working as best they can, hand in hand, to try to solve this case and get back Miss Guthrie.
Absolutely. For those that haven't seen this is a Houston area sketch artist, apparently a world-renowned sketch artist. This is her sketch artist of what she believes The perpetrator in the video that we've all watched, the one who was armed with a gun that approached Nancy Guthrie's home, tried to disguise himself, ripped the camera out. This is what she drew. And just, keep that in mind. It potentially could be quite a good sketch. We're not sure. So to recap, we're looking at not random. Well, that's what we believe. This was not a random act by this guy just driving by and choosing to do a home invasion. And then, of course, the glove that was left inside the house and the glove that they've recovered a couple of miles or mile and a half from this location. All of that is important evidence. And then we have the backpack that they've identified. All of this is things that can lead to the identity of the perpetrator, not smoking gun information. The gloves found, the backpack ID'd, and, we mentioned very early on the person of interest. And that's really all we have right now. The person of
Great
interest.
chat today, Billy. And I think keep those comments coming and keep subscribing and liking.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with the chat today. And I'm also impressed with a lot of people in our chat that are new to the Police Off the Cuff family. And
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome, everyone. And thank you so much for joining the Police Off the Cuff family. And we're going to stay with this case, hopefully to a positive conclusion. We don't know 100% that that's what's going to happen, but we certainly hope so. So, folks, again, thank you so much for tuning in. On behalf of myself, Bill Cannon, Professor Mike Geary, retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.